committee and guests. Welcome to our committee meeting today. What we're going to be doing today is on the agenda is the budgets for the Department of Agriculture and Kansas Department of Health and environmental piece of that. We'll start with the Department of Agriculture, but first we want to, now that everybody's here, we can need a motion to approve the corrected minutes for January 27th. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I provided some additions to our Secretary Judy that simply put in the quotes from the balloon amendment that I had offered, and also clarified that there was already a motion on the table for the public water supply. And she has made those corrections. I would move we approve the minutes as corrected.
Seconded by Senator Ware. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thank you, Senator Francisco, for diligence on making sure it's accurate. We appreciate that. Okay, we're going to move over to the Department of Agriculture budget, and we will open it up for recommendations from the committee, and we'll do that now. So, Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year we passed a Senate Bill 143 that gave the Department of Agriculture the ability to raise fees on grain inspection. And then last year for the 22 budget, we gave out of general fund $60,000. I was talking to the Department of Agriculture yesterday, and they told me it was kind of an oversight on their part. If we don't add this $60,000 for the 23-24 budget, the Department of Agriculture will have to raise fees again to $120,000. So what I'm asking is if we could add $60,000 from the State General Fund for the KDA grain warehouse program for 23 and 24 to allow the agency to avoid its proposed fee increase on licensed public grain warehouses.
Okay, thank you, Senator Dahl, very much. Committee, any comments, questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question is, are we working on the budget for 24 at this time?
Victoria.
Thank you for the question. Yes, so funds could be added for 23 and 24, even though we don't technically hear 24. The appropriations bill does go until 24.
Any other questions? Senator Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to oppose nor support this additional money. When 143 was passed last session, the industry was supportive of the fee increases. This is another perfect example of you can't trust government to keep fees down. And so I understand the proposal, I understand why, I understand the issue, but I just thought that it is an opportunity for us to remind the private sector when working with government, never think they're going to have your back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that in many ways this should be a fee-funded industry, but we were seeing significant increases. At some point, we probably should allow those fees to be raised, but I understand the intent and the reason for doing it for the next 2 years.
Senator Dahl.
The fees were raised $60,000 last year, so.
Any other questions? Senator Fagg.
No, I was just going to say I'm behind Senator Dahl on what he's saying there. So I think that's something we need to do.
Okay. Other questions or comments? No, did you make that as a motion?
I make that a motion.
A motion and a second by Senator Reichman to pass on the $60,000 payment for 23 and 24 years. Everybody understand that? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually agree with both Senator Dahl and Senator Peck. Don't get too comfortable. But wanting to support the agriculture industry in our state, I'm going to support Senator Dahl on this one. Thank you.
Ultimately, the producer pays at the end if it doesn't happen. So, any other discussion? Senator Francisco.
Yes, is this otherwise concurring with the budget, or are we handling issues sort of one at a time?
Senator Dahl.
The way I see it, this is not concurring with the budget at this time. This is being put into the budget as I see it.
All right. All those in favor of the proposal signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. It is adopted. Any other recommendations for the budget? Department of Agriculture. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, and I'm not finding it. I usually make notes so I can go back and find it. So I would ask on the SGF enhancement, which is on page 8 in that box, could it be reminded, or could I be reminded what that $1.4 million is, or what page I can find it? I just had circled that amount, and anytime I circle something, that means I need to take a second or third look, because it is additional state general fund money.
Did you have a question? Or
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I was wondering if our fiscal analyst could point me, because it says down that it's detailed in the supplemental enhancement section of this document. Well, I guess I haven't found the supplemental and enhancement section yet, and our research analyst probably could point me real quick.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Senator Peck is looking on page 7 at the item number 1 in the box, the SGF enhancements, 1.4 million, but details of those start on page 10 of the document that I present from. So looking at page 10, 11, and the very top of page 12, each one of those is a state general fund enhancement. For the most part, dealing with additional positions, except for the feral swine contracts on page 12. All of those enhancements, again, are SGF funded, causing that $1.4 million increase that Senator Peck is referencing on page 7.
committee, any comments or questions on that? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that information. It looks like on page 11, we are adding 3 FTEs to the dam safety program positions, as well as 72,000 for new vehicles. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, so that table on page 11, the agency requested 3 additional positions. The governor did not recommend adding those positions. She just recommended the funding. So they recommended that the agency use vacant positions, so not growing the overall number of FTEs the agency is allowed, but still giving them the funding for those engineer positions on page 11.
Thank you.
That's the way it as is now. If it's
Right, that's the governor's recommendation, is not to add those FTE positions, but just the funding.
any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the one other issue that came up that I think it would be important for the committee to address would be the number of meat and poultry program inspectors. We did add or see significant ability added through federal programs for some of our small meat inspectors. And I don't, I know that the governor has approved an additional 3. I would like to see either the other 3 or some compromise of an additional 1 or 2 to make sure that we can provide those inspection services for our expanded small meat packers.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe I had asked a couple days ago about how many facilities that we currently have that we inspect and how many of those are new facilities. I believe I was told that there are roughly around 37 current inspectors, and some of those positions are also vacant at this time. So I think we need a little bit more information on exactly where we sit as far as inspectors and number of facilities we have to inspect.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To help, on page 11, and if I'm following you correctly, Senator Francisco, says the governor recommends 539,000, so on, including 300 blah, blah, and 3 FTE positions for filling the vacant inspector positions, and does not recommend 72,000 salary increase. Now, are you recommending that we go past the governors to add more inspectors? Is that what you were talking about? Thank you.
So if you go back to page 10, the agency requested 6 positions and 3 were allocated. So I'm just wanting to make sure that we, as Senator Straub pointed out, I think we need to understand what the situation is, but what we heard from the agency was the need for that, and I don't know if the agency can comment on that.
Does the agency want to comment on that? Or
Good morning, committee. My name is Kelsey Olson, and I'm the Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I shared with you yesterday a map, and I was trying to calculate exactly how many facilities that we have at the exact moment. I believe we're in the 60 range. We have added 15 new plants since 2020. We have 16 new plants that are in the process of building plants and becoming a state inspected facility. And there are 9 additional custom or partially inspected plants that are in the process of transitioning to become state inspected plants. So overall, that would bring us to 40 new potential plants that we would have seen since 2020, which would almost double our current facilities that are inspected. Does that answer at least the first part of the question? I missed the second half.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Deputy Secretary. I appreciate that information. That does help, and I imagine that these are somewhat scattered across the state, so I can understand your need for people to inspect, and we want to encourage individual and private meat processing facilities. So I would support the additional positions that were requested by the department. Thank you.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much. This is be open for anybody. I'd like to know the reasoning that the governors, that they recommended 3 when they came through 6. Does anyone here know how they came to that number? Thank you.
on, is it? I apologize to everyone online. A total of 6 positions, but a net of 3 because 3 were vacant.
That is very helpful to my understanding, and appreciate that in addition to what we're able to read in the budget document.
Follow up on that a little bit, on the positions. You just mentioned the growth in the industry and the new plants that's coming on. Will that satisfy that need then, or do we have enough or close to it?
Kelsey Olson again with the agency. Yes, when we prepared that budget enhancement, we took into consideration the growth that we had seen and the projected growth that we are anticipating based on current conversations with potential licensees. So that total number of 6 does account for the current growth and the projected growth.
Thank you very much. Your thoughts on that, committee? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frequently, agencies have vacant positions. I was thinking that I had heard from our fiscal analyst that there were still vacant positions. And if there are vacant positions, they don't need additional personnel. They can just fill those vacant positions. If I'm wrong, someone can tell me.
Great question. To clarify, these were unfunded vacant positions of our last budget. So they showed up when we ran position descriptions and position numbers, but they were unfunded vacant positions. So they weren't included in our last budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is the funding is there to fill some of those vacant positions. Correct or incorrect?
Can you?
That's what I'm getting at. The number of positions is not really so much the issue as the money to fill the vacant positions.
Correct. That this enhancement allows us to bring on 6 additional that we did not have the funding for when the budget was originally submitted.
I understand that, but I guess what I'm trying to get at, Mr. Chairman, is I think they've got the numbers, they just didn't have the funding. So I would not be supportive of adding additional FTEs when the funding appears to be there, new funding for vacant positions that they could then hire. So if I'm speaking out of school, please correct me.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was asking for information about the positions. We've gotten that information, and I believe there's no recommendation being discussed right now to add positions or money that are not already in the budget.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I would like to honor the agency's request for these additional positions. They did give us the number of new facilities, and my thoughts on this whole issue are right now the current meat packing industry is controlled by 4 major packing companies, and they have an oligopoly going on here. And whatever we can do, I'm not one to usually spend more money, but if this is something that can assist our Kansas ranchers in making sure that our food supply is secure, this is a national security issue. Food security is a national security issue. And with 2 of our major meat packers owned by Brazil currently, I absolutely would support the additional. I think the governor had also recommended the $539,000, including the $329,000 SGF and the 3 FTE positions. What I would prefer that we put in the recommendation, the 6 FTE positions requested by the agency and the $72,000 also requested for salary increases, because a happier inspector, an inspector that's more secure in their job, is going to be more helpful to our Kansas ranchers and individual meat packers. So that's my reasoning for supporting the agency's request on that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's your position. You want to make that as a recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay. Did you have a comment, Chad? Okay. All right. Victoria, where are we at on a motion? What was all involved in it before Senator Straub added her addition on there? What do we have?
But before that, I don't believe there was a motion on it was just discussion. Senator Francisco had asked for information, and so I don't believe there was a motion before that, before Senator Straub's,
Haven't approved anything yet.
other than the 60,000 for grain warehouse, but yes.
So that's, committee, we have a motion, we may have a motion to include Senator Straub's addition there as a package.
I'll second that.
Moved and second that the motion is what, it's not in the reason.
My recommendation would be that we honor the agency's request of the 6 FTEs and the additional 72,000 requested for salary increases.
Now, is that make that a motion?
Yes.
And is there a second? Second by Senator Fagg. Any more discussion? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just point out for the committee's benefit, on page 1, in actual fiscal year 2021, the FTE positions was 297, and is approved by the governor, increases to 336. So my understanding is this would bump that up to 339, which is an additional 42 positions over what they had in 21. That would be a question. I didn't put a question mark after it, but now it is. And I don't know who to answer the question, Mr. Chairman, but just again, I think when we start adding positions, we need to look at what has happened over the last couple of years.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't agree with Virgil a lot, but I do in this one. I think we ought to go with I think we ought to go with the governor's recommendations. My understanding, they came forward, they can take care of these 6 they have in there, and I don't think we're in a position to know exactly how many we have and so on, and I'm not in favor of putting in more money when they have what the governor has here. So I would vote against this motion, and I would support the governor's recommendation. Thank you.
All right, committee. Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the world's a lot different the last few years, and we talked during this testimony about how many smaller packing facilities are you know, the 3 or 4 steers a day type thing is really picked up, because I hear it all the time, that the waiting time to get your steer processed. And so the need is not like the need was when we did the 21 budget. So I will be supporting this motion.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was the one that brought up this discussion and believe that I heard from the agency, and it wasn't clear to me when I was reading the budget, because it said the governor, approved the 3. The other 3 are vacant positions that are being filled. So my understanding is that the agency will now have an additional 6. If we make this motion, they will have an additional 9. I would like to wait till next year to find out how many more packing plants you have approved. But I was very comfortable to hear that all 6 positions were filled. That was my concern, and that's what I understand now, so I will not be supporting this motion.
Okay, anybody else? Comments? Questions? No, we have a motion and a second. We'll vote. All in favor of the suggested amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? No. Chair is in doubt. Let them raise their hand. I don't hear that good. All in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Let's count.
Then can we ask the agency what their request was? Because I thought their request was met by the governor's budget.
Sounds like we're on.
If not, then I'd go along with this.
Or I can answer if that's all right with Senator Francisco. So the agency's request is 6 positions and funding to go with those positions. The governor's recommendation has the funding for all 6, but only adding 3 and using current vacant positions for the other 3. So the funding is there for all 6. Senator Straub, if it wants to match the agency request, which would bring the added positions to 6 plus the salary increases. Does that answer your question? So we're still talking about a total of 6 inspectors, not 9.
Then my other concern would be about the part of this motion that includes the salary increases, because we are talking about salary increases across the board. And I would assume if we added these and then there was an additional 5%, that could be beyond what the agency was requesting. Thank you.
Any other comments? Senator Dahl.
I think 3 of those were unfunded. Real bad.
Victoria? He's asked if they thought they were unfunded.
Kellen can correct me if I'm wrong, because under the governor's recommendation, all 6 are funded. So 3, Kellen, can you help me? 3 were unfunded and 3 were, sorry.
Yes. So 3 were on our books as positions but unfunded. As part of the governor's budget recommendation, all 6 are funded.
Okay, committee. Senator Straub, one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. So the 6 FTEs that the agency had requested, are those positions scattered across the state? Because it's my understanding that a lot of these people work from home and cover different geographic regions.
Yes. Currently, the agency has 33 to 34 inspectors that cover the entire geographical region of the entire state, and it would be our point to put those additional inspectors across geographical distribution of the state as well, and to cover points of the state that have that necessary capability to serve the industry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I stand with my original motion to increase those positions as per the agency's request and the additional $72,000 for salaries so that they may recruit for those positions in the areas that are needed, with the full understanding that it's highly likely with our staffing shortages across every industry that it's highly likely they will still be unable to fill some of those positions.
All right, thank you very much. Committee, you ready to vote? We're going to vote on the Straub amendment for the process to take place, and we'll do it by a show of hands. All in favor of the Straub amendment, raise your right hand. All opposed? Is that a tie? It's time for recess. I'm going to vote against the amendment. I'll go with the governor's recommendation. So the motion has failed. Really close. Next, committee. Now we're back on the governor's recommendation as this other choice. Anybody have any comments on that? Senator McGinn.
Did we fix the technical error that they had? Just gonna pull up my computer. It was in Kalen's testimony that they had a technical error on how they did the budget before they submitted it, and it has to do with the reallocation of resources was not shown appropriately. And so I would make a motion to just fix their technical error in the budget.
Okay. Moving second, we fix the technical error in the department's budget. Any discussion? But the director did call me and said that you was going to bring that up, so.
Has to do with the irrigation technology.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Back on the recommendations. Any other recommendations for today? Senator Francisco.
I would make a motion that the committee concur with the governor's recommendations for FY22 and FY23 as amended.
Is there a second? Second by Senator Ware. Any discussion?
Oh.
Any clarification here?
I'm saying 22, 23, well, it was amended to add 24. The 24 was in one of the amendments. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Committee, any other recommendations for the Department of Agriculture? Seeing none, we will close the meeting on Department of Agriculture budget and proceed to the Department of Health and environmental budget. Committee, any recommendations or considerations on that? Seeing none, I did, Kansas Livestock Association did call me back, and they discussed this yesterday, and we talked about it, their proposal in writing to basically put off that until if there's a budget cut going to happen, that would come from the personnel in the permitting, in the inspections rather than the permitting part of it. And I think he passed out everybody a copy of that. Is that in your? Can I get copies of this made? Okay, so everybody's got one. Okay. Want to look and take a look at that in your file? Part of the rationale was that they wasn't necessarily opposed to positions, but we got by last year on this very same declaration, used the same words, and we didn't lose an inspector. And some felt that there's some money out there in the next year, probably from grants or federal money that might help on something like this. So we was inclined to leave it like it was and wait to see what happens. Everybody has got that read? Should be the same as last year's budget amendment.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Francisco.
So how would this then affect, I mean, is the attachment the proviso for 2022, and we would need to change the date?
Yeah, basically. That's where I understood it.
Okay. If you'd like that as a motion? I would. I would move that the committee recommend the same wording that was used in House Bill 2007, Section 82, with changes to say that during the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, and then make the other dates, 22 to 23, 21 to 22, and 22 to 23, if our revisor agrees. That those would be the appropriate changes in the dates.
What do you think, Victoria? It sounds good to me.
So yeah, changing all of the 22s to 23s and the, yeah, in fiscal year 2020. Yep, 21 to 22. Perfect.
All right, you got that under the wrap there. Everybody understand where we're at on that? Got it corrected? Approved by 2 revisors. So I'll make that a motion to submit this as a recommendation for the governor, to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment's budget.
So, Mr. Chair, I made that motion. Would you like to second?
I'll second it. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item, committee, anything else? Other suggestions or recommendations for the health and environment? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We ran out of time yesterday, and I had a question. Deputy Secretary Henning said something in his presentation that I wanted to just follow up on for the good of the committee, if that's acceptable, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Deputy Secretary, you had said when talking about some of the federal money that came in, you used the word had to, and you said you had to purchase equipment and had to hire personnel. Was that, I've got a couple questions. Was that a requirement to receive the federal money? And then if the federal money goes away, what are we going to do with those additional positions that we are filling?
Okay. Good morning. Leo Henning, Deputy Secretary and Director of Environment at KDHE. I think your question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is regarding the lab staff that we had to put on to keep up with the COVID testing demands.
That would probably be what you were talking about. It's been 24 hours approximately, but
okay.
It had to do with the federal money that you said you had to.
So those were all added because of the demand for the testing. The federal dollars came to us to perform that testing. When that testing is no longer needed at the rate we're currently testing, those positions are tied to that funding. So when the funding goes away, those positions go away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So those positions will be evaporated, and I know you can't look into the future very much, but is this committee hearing today that the agency then will eliminate those positions, ask us to eliminate the FTEs, and make a significant reduction potentially to the division?
As they are funded with federal dollars for COVID testing. If the federal dollars for COVID testing goes away, those positions are tied to that funding. So those positions would be reduced.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little unusual for an agency to give us that kind of a promise. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Senator Reichman?
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing that up, Senator Peck. I had a question. I was going to call you on the phone, but since you're here, we have a lot about the COVID testing, and you went through the list of all the stuff you got to prepare for, and so on and so forth. If someone came up to me and says, "What's it cost to get tested?" I mean, even though the population wasn't necessarily paid, but there's no free lunch, even though I see advertised at KDHE there is. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's paying for it.
Right.
Could you answer that? Thank you.
I cannot. I do not have those numbers with me by any But I can tell you, we received $128 million for the COVID testing, but that was not for just the actual test. It was also all the supplies, the salary. So I've never gone back and tried to tease out what the cost per test is. So I cannot answer that question.
Mr. Chairman, may I follow up?
Go ahead, Senator.
My granddaughter's husband, when he was going to get let go or not taking the vaccine, he could get tested, but the government wasn't going to pay for it, and they was going to charge him $150. And I didn't know, so I was just wondering if that was close. That was where my question originated. Thank you.
Comments or questions for the secretary? Thank you, Leo. Oh. Okay. Thank you very much, Leo. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have from the governor a recommendation of $69 million for the new lab, and we, meaning the legislature, passed legislation last session, Senate Bill 159, to allow for them to bond. Do we need to put any language in here that says, due to this, we are encouraging something to eliminate their authority to bond the money for this project? I don't want them receiving $69 million and then bonding 2 or 3 or 4 million, because they have the authority to bond up to $65 million. And that's on page 40, the very last paragraph. It just says that the governor recommends expenditures, including 69, and this increase is 65 above the request, and it's to build a lab, which I think most of us are supportive of the lab. My point, again, is just to make certain that it's not on the books that they have that bonding authority when we have given them the money. I was also curious, I think it was asked yesterday, and I don't know if it was Senator Fagg who asked or whom, but Senate Bill 159 authorized issuance of bonds up to $65 million, and I don't remember if we got an answer if the 65 included the cost of issuing the bonds.
Senator, I understand. I have a mark on where I left that off, and that somebody brought that up, but there's no conclusion. I think they were going to check on that. Didn't have the answer for it, basically.
Okay, that was my remembrance as well, that we did not have an answer, but
we have the budget director here. Well, Mr. Prophet will come on and help us out. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Adam Prophet, Director of the Budget. Thank you for the opportunity to come explain, and thank you for the question, Senator. I'm going to break it down into a couple of pieces, if that's all right, so I can address all of your questions that I've heard so far, and please tell me if I miss. As it relates to the bonding authority in Senate Bill 159 from last year, it did authorize the agency to issue up to $65 million. I don't have Senate Bill 159 in front of me. I believe it said the net proceeds of the bonds, net of cost of issuance and everything else. So that would be the $65 million would then flow to the proceeds. The $65 million would flow to KDHE for the cost of constructing the lab. Obviously, in the out years, there would be debt service associated with that we'd have to pay interest and whatnot. The $65 million should be the net coming to the state to pay for the lab. So that's the bond question, if I've answered it correctly. As it relates to, obviously, it's the will of the committee and the revisers to give advice, but the governor did put in $65 million of SGF this year to pay cash for, in fiscal 23, not fiscal 22, to pay cash for the lab so that we can avoid incurring new debt. We were very clear in the governor's recommendation and with the agencies that the $65 million is here. You still need to go look for federal dollars to offset that cost. So the agencies are going to look for federal dollars. We don't yet have a full estimate of how much federal money will be available to help with the cost. Once that is identified by the Recovery Office and KDHE, the governor is going to issue a GBA reducing the $65 million to the net of the federal costs and the SGF, and they won't be going forward with any bonds at that point. So I think I've addressed that question, but please let me know if not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that information. It does address the questions. My question remains, and not necessarily for yourself, about somehow, if you will, backing up or reversing the authority in Senate Bill 159 to issue the bonds because they're not necessary. And I don't know if the authority to issue bonds just hanging out there has any potential dangers for the state, but that's my concern. And I appreciate the answers. And I appreciate the fact that they're going to be looking for federal money to reduce the cost to the state of Kansas. So again, he's answered my questions. I sincerely appreciate it, but
Thank you very much.
just curious if we should suggest something to the Ways and Means Committee that they might introduce legislation or somehow handle Senate Bill 159. So I'll leave that to the wisdom of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I was going to mention, the last statement made there says the governor's recommendation includes expenditures for the project, but not bonds. So, all right. Well, I will tell you what we can do, when this goes to Ways and Means Committee, we can want somebody to have the committee look at that or try to find an answer for that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that was sort of just to bring it to the attention of Ways and Means that this bond is out there, but the money is now being appropriated, so there's no need for the bond. Let's just make certain that there is no bond. It's not that I don't trust government agencies. But anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm assuming that in that bill, the bonds were attached to the construction of the building. And so my understanding is they could not be spent for anything else, but.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. That is 100% correct. There were several sections and several subsections within that. It was tied directly to the construction of the lab. That authority would expire at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, 2022, for the benefit of the committee. And my word is only as good as my word. I understand that. But the bonding would have to run through my office, and I would have to set that up and move forward. I have no desire to go through that process right now if we don't need to. It's cumbersome, and I don't like it.
Thank you, Mr. Proft, for being here today. You can come back anytime. Senator Fagg.
This is kind of off Senator Peck's deal. If we had a cost overrun on this project that went to 70 million, could they take and bond the other 5 million? He's got me thinking on this now. So what happens when we have a cost overrun in this kind of thing?
Senator Francisco.
I think we just heard that the authority of the bonds expired at the end of this fiscal year. So I think it would be really hard. I would love it if the building could be built and operational by June 30th, and we did find out whether or not we had an overrun. But I don't think that's going to happen this year, so that authority would not be there.
Thank you very much. Good question, Senator Fagg. Any other recommendations? Senator Francisco.
If there are no other recommendations, I would make a motion. Haven't had any amendments. So I would make a motion to adopt, for the committee to concur with the governor's recommendations for fiscal years 22 and 23 for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment section. And
second.
Victoria's going to help me. And as amended.
You got that, Victoria, then? Thanks for reminding us of that. All right, we got a motion, a second. Senator Fagg.
I want to make sure on this engineering thing. Can we read that part of it again? Was that page 2 of what we had? I want to make sure what the amendment was, the details of it. So we did cover the extra engineer. I wonder what the amendment was. Can we read the amendment? Is that page 2 of that,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman? Okay. Okay.
They weren't telling them, it was a matter if you were going to replace somebody, they wanted to pick a certain person
Okay,
able to do it.
okay. All right.
Okay, we have a motion second or concur with the governor's budget on Department of Health and Environment Agency. Any other final comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. The budget is adopted for the Department of Health and Environment. Committee, that wraps up our work for today, for the year. So thank you very much for all your help and attention.